This is the CW Spiral, a podcast run by 3 survivors of the CW's calling in 2022. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gaudens,
bringing you history about the network and the WB, the latest news and in-depth Sporterville discussions of the best and messiest shows to ever grace the small screen. So, we are back for our 3rd season. Yay! It is, if you've been listening to the pod, you know that we are taking a pivot from what the CW is doing because it's some nonsense over there, at least in terms of our taste. And so we will not be covering Sullivan's Crossing, the Spencer Sisters, Son of a Critch, Run the Burbs, something Burns. Everyone else burns. And a host of other shows that they have coming for the fall or have already started airing on the network. But we're very excited because we're going back into the vault to rediscover some shows, unpack some things about the WB content, and early CW content that was absolutely perfect, but maybe couldn't live in the TV landscape that it had been born into. But as always, we will have CW news, and we're going to kick it off by talking about 2 shows that we will not be watching. And that is Sullivan's Crossing and the Spencer Sisters, because by the time this pod is up, it'll be the week that they premiere, because they premiere on Wednesday, October 4th. First up is Sullivan's Crossing, that stars Morgan Cohen as Matthew Sullivan, Chad Michael Murray, yes, that Chad Michael Murray, as Cal Jones, and Scott Patterson of Gilmore Girls fame, and he'll be playing Harry Sullivan, whose nickname is Sully. But the show, the way that they've been marketing it online is the show is basically for the Virgin River girlies because it's based on the novels by the same author, Robin Carr, and it's about a neurosurgeon who finds herself in legal trouble and returns to her hometown in rural Nova Scotia to reconnect with her estranged father, Sully. Doesn't sound like anything that's been on the CW, but they're trying new things.
Yeah, it does. It's giving whispers of Heart of Dixie.
Ooh, okay.
But you're right. The Virgin River connection is very strong.
Mm-hmm. Is that where we're leaving that one?
I think.
But I mean, for those who do enjoy Virgin River, at least this is something that, isn't behind a paywall. You can just watch it on the CW, enjoy it for what it is, and you can expect a second season because the CW will be helping to produce season 2. So it's locked in on the CW. You will not have to worry about cancellations stateside. Presumably. I don't know. They were pulling things off air, but doubtful they're going to pull this one out since they actually have money invested in this one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Love that journey for everybody who's on it.
Positivity. I like that. So, and then there's the Spencer Sisters, which this one's like a mystery drama comedy. Where it says when her daughter Darby unexpectedly returns home, having resigned from her career as a police officer in protest for being overlooked, the famed mystery novelist Victoria Spencer decides to finally pursue her dream of being a private detective. The 2 women form the Spencer Sisters Detective Agency. It's called that because apparently Victoria is often confused for Darby's sister. So they say.
Leah Thompson, skincare routine.
Right? Okay. But Leah Thompson plays Victoria Spencer and Stacey Farber plays Darby Spencer.
That's interesting. There's a Virgin River connection here too, because Stacey Farber had a recurring role on Virgin River, and her character leaves season 5 to move to some city. I can't remember. It's gonna bug me now. I wonder if she left to do this. Did not put that together until this very moment.
So maybe there is some method to the madness. Maybe they said, you know who we need? The Virgin River audience.
Yeah. It's all
what did she go to? She left for a job. It's neither here nor there. I'll figure it out.
But see, there's a promo plan there if they wanted to do it, where you just put Stacey Farber in a car. She's leaving from some type of small town into the big city, and she's like, finally, I arrived. And it's a Spencer Sister promo. That's what they do. And then last but not least, Crime Nation is coming to the CW in 2024. This is not a scripted television show. It is unscripted. It'll be a true crime series, 10 episodes long, 2 hours each. From the former ABC News president, James Goldston, the series will follow mysteries, cold cases, and investigations. And these cases will include the Delphi murders, the Lori Vallow Daybell case, the Gabby Petito murder, and the Gilgo Beach murders. It's supposed to be like an answer to 60 Minutes and 48 Hours on the CW. Good luck to them with that.
See, I can kind of like see the vision a little bit. Like they got true crime, they got reality TV, they got the Virgin River stuff. I can see the vision, but it's still so like it's a puzzle, and I feel like I'm missing a piece.
Yeah. At this stage, it feels like we shouldn't have to raise our eyebrows at some of the new content that comes, but like this one got me. I was like, oh, we're still throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks.
Oh, and sports. I forgot sports in that list.
Oh yeah. There's another one. But you know what I mean? It's just starting to look like a whole random collection of shows that don't necessarily have any identity other than the Virgin River crowd. They have their own little audience there. But aside from that, it just feels like, okay, that's on it. Happy for the crime folk, but on the CW.
It's just
That's 20 hours of content for anybody that, didn't do the math. That's still like mind-boggling to me.
It is. I mean, if it is on Sundays, I get it. Like, sure. But it very much feels like they were looking at like the other broadcast networks, and they were like, what do they have that we don't have that we need to get immediately? And they got it. And I'm like, they took years to develop that. Like, we can't just pivot extremely. And also, you know what they have that the CW no longer has now? Well, except for one franchise. They have one franchise. One. The other networks have a few of them. Like, do they not? Like, and All American, because it's older, just feels like it's not long for this world. So, like, you have All American Homecoming. That's your franchise. That's the one that we're investing in. But you had one other. You had Walker and Walker Independence. We could have capitalized on the Western movement along with the sports, and I just don't see why we haven't. Which I guess this will segue into so we will be back with CW original content come 2024 because we still have Superman and Lois, and that is the show that we cover on this podcast. We are also gonna try Joan because Sophie Turner is in it. And then everything else, we'll look at the promos first. we'll see based on the promos. But that's basically where we are when it comes to the CW currently, which is a weird place to be in.
The new CW is giving little sister trying on your clothes when you're not home. She's just swimming in that sweater. Put it in the closet.
I know. She might come out with a look.
She's trying.
You might come into the room and she has found something.
She's digging through the drawers. God bless her heart.
I really ran with that metaphor.
Yeah,
it worked. It was one of our strongest extended metaphors, I think.
But in the interim, like I was saying at the top of the pod, we do have things that we want to delve into. And one of those is Tarzan. Odd choice, but I recommend watching the promo for Tarzan and you'd see the vision. But what also, I believe, guys, wasn't this just seemed a lot, the stars lined up, right? Because we didn't know the 20th anniversary is October 5th when we chose Tarzan.
It was meant to be. Truly. And for anybody that's like, Tarzan, not the Disney movie, not the Alexander Skarsgård movie, the 2003 WB short-lived, I wouldn't even say classic because we didn't know it existed until about a month ago. Tarzan.
And I have to say, the pilot episode was amazing.
It was truly something. Just so cozy.
Yeah.
It was like, to go back to the sweaters, it was like slipping into a very comfortable sweater. It reminded me of the television that we very much enjoyed in the early 2000s. And they don't make TV like this anymore. They
Don't.
don't, and I'm sad about it. It
I
was
know.
TV movie level of perfection in that pilot.
Yeah, it was like the perfect amount of cheese, the
Mhm.
perfect amount of like taking it seriously, but also knowing it's very silly. And I just have to say that what in the format we were watching it in, seeing the WB logo at the corner of the screen just was like so soul affirming. Like I can't explain how much I love that network and its content, and just like even though it was like not HD, not like remastered, like what we see is what we're getting, but just seeing that logo, oh, just made me. It was just like I don't even want to say serotonin because it's not strong enough because it was just so good to see that logo.
It was so nostalgic. I mean, like, if you could personify the early 2000s or the late 90s with an episode of television, I felt like we got all of it in the first 5 minutes. The overhead city shots, the like fight in the rain with no dialogue whatsoever. If this was a modern TV show, there would have been dialogue, there would have been epic music. You just heard the raindrops, you just heard every overly dramatic punch accentuated. And I mean, like, you're right, they don't make TV like that anymore. I just like Reed said, first 5 minutes in it, you just instantly felt thrown back to an era you grew up with, and like this like hidden gem we didn't even know existed. I was like, I would absolutely have been watching this if I knew it was on TV back then.
No. So the opening though, I laughed because I forgot that they used to cut scenes together like that. Like that extended for whatever reason, it's the extended shot over the city, and it's like cut, 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 where you get to the rooftop fight. And I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm eating it up. Like it's just I love being reminded of that style of camera work that they used to do. Or like when to move further into the plot, when you meet Jane, and there was a particular way that they used to have cops talk on television, and hearing that in my ear again, I was like, oh my God, it's like watching an old episode of Law and Order. It's like because there's just this cadence they have to their voice. And I don't know if that's like I don't know what if there was a word for it back then for the type of dialogue that they would give them, but it felt warm and cozy and very much like not crime noir, but it just moved at a clip, and they all had very distinct personalities. And love it or hate it, those were who those people were going to be, and they may or may not get fleshed out, and then you just have to kind of roll with it. And I didn't know how I was going to feel about Jane. I love Jane. I love Jane a lot.
Yeah.
Icon. So it's been a hot millisecond since I watched anything Tarzan related. Was Jane, was she a reporter? Why did I think that she was a reporter? Or is that just because she's like a little bit Lois Lane coded?
She is a little bit Lois Lane coded. I'm not sure. I think maybe the promo was kind of giving that. I don't know when we watched the trailer whether or not I thought she was a cop. They could have said it, and I just might not have been paying attention. But I do understand what you mean, because even when like you're in the bullpen, and you're moving along, if you hadn't been paying attention to like the holsters, it kind of gives.
Yeah, I was like, oh, she's a cop. That's not a newsroom. I was like, I kind of decided going into it that she was a reporter. I was like, oh no, she's in a police station. Okay.
I like that. It was very much like a modern spin on it, because when the old material and the old images you always used to see, and the old like out of context clips would always have Tarzan swinging in to save Jane, and this is for the early 2000s was very like modern adaptations, because obviously Jane not the kind of person who necessarily needs rescuing. Of course, the plot creates a few situations where she does need rescuing, but the premise sets it up as though that she's ultimately going to have to be the one to rescue him, because he's in a bit of a pickle here, and she's going to have to be the one to help him get out of it. And no one else really believes in her other than her partner, and she's going to be the one that ultimately does it. I mean, if we get that far in 8 episodes. But I mean, I really, really do like that. It's very much of a modern twist, and it does go back to the whole like late 2000s or early 2000s, late 90s kind of idea of the strong, powerful female heroine as well, like Buffy going to save her male counterpart, like Angel, who would obviously save her from time to time as well. So I like that. I think it worked really well. seeing Sarah Wayne Callies in the role, I was shocked to know the show existed. She has been a part of so many big franchises. Of course, she played Sarah in Prison Break and Laurie in The Walking Dead. So I followed her career, but yet I still didn't know the show existed. I love her in the role. I love seeing Jane be such a badass. And yeah, I can't wait to see where it goes after that.
Should we explain what it's about to anybody who like didn't watch?
Right. So
that just clicked in my mind.
So Tarzan is set in a universe in which his name's John Clayton. His family and him got into I'm assuming, plane crash into the middle of the Congo, and it was assumed by his uncle that they had all died. But when we're brought up to speed, it turns out that like his uncle actually finds him in the Congo. I'm not sure if he was looking for him or they just happened to be on an expedition. We haven't gotten that far yet. Yeah. But he finds him, and then he keeps him under house arrest and seems to be experimenting on him for reasons unknown. And Tarzan escapes. He meets Jane. They have a very I'm Tarzan, you Jane moment on a rooftop, and they seem to have some type of connection, and it pushes Jane to advocate for him. But as this is happening, there's an overall case involving the flame broiler man, I believe.
What was his name?
Something broiler man. He was lighting homeless people
Edward
on fire.
Creel, something Crawler. Something Crawler, right?
Yeah, his truck said Dead Crawler, and it was an anagram for Edward Creel, but his name is actually Gregory Creel. I feel like the Creels are going to come back at some point, but that's the case that Jane is inadvertently working on. It's not her case; it's her boyfriend Michael's case. Which
he's dirty, right?
I don't know. He's
up to something.
Yeah, I don't get good vibes from him.
I liked him at first, but then towards the end, I was like, why are we getting we're moving fast.
He's taking a lot of phone calls. He's got a secret, and I don't trust him.
Yeah. No, he came across as quite shady to me. Obviously, when you know that Jane is going to have a romantic connection with Tarzan, we knew this man would become the third wheel, and God bless his soul. But like, the show kind of made him seem quite shady to me. He wasn't nice to her partner, Jane's partner. And then I believe when he was on that phone call, didn't he know the man who showed up to collect his brother?
Oh, his uncle?
His uncle, sorry, yes. Didn't he know? I believe they had an interaction where it implied that they knew each other. So yeah, not getting good vibes from Michael. He's got a good name. That's all I'll say. But the good things about him end there. He's getting maybe possessive's the wrong word, but he's rushing into everything and not exactly in a romantic kind of way. It's almost out of fear or desperation. I don't know, but not getting good vibes from him at all.
I love too that no matter how many times they try to lock up Tarzan, he's just like, no. I'm gonna be swinging from these skyscrapers in a hot minute. Like, they all assume he's like unintelligent or that he can't speak, because maybe that's part of his intelligence, is making them believe that about him. But like, he pretends to be unconscious, which I want to know how, because they gave him some drug, but he had the wherewithal to grab the ID badge so he could get out of his cage or whatever. But yeah, and he has like sonar powers, which I'm excited to figure out, because he heard the gunshot. No one was shot, but Jane's gun went off when the man who burns people alive got in an altercation with her. And I was like, how are you hearing that? You're an enigma, sir.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed.
Because the earlier in the episode, he had said, she's like, how did you find me? And he's like, I hunted you. I hunt. And I was like,
yeah.
And that was very in character for Tarzan. I was like, Tarzan, it's New York. It's New York City, is it not? Or some type of, or is it Chicago? I don't know where we are. No, it's New York City. It's in Times Square.
Yeah, it was given New York.
Yeah. I was like, how did you hunt her in the concrete jungle? and then they were like, then they told us, it's like, oh, the ears. Okay, now we get to unravel this. I did like that they saved that story piece until towards the end, because it makes you want to know more.
There's just like so like this is a pilot. Like when pilots really just piloted, like there's just so much good stuff going on in this. And I mean, we shouldn't be surprised, I guess, because it's from Eric Kripke. Am I saying that correctly? Supernatural, The Boys, I think.
Yep.
So like, it was all the gas in the tank was there. Like he knew what he was doing. Like I never would have imagined to see like Tarzan 2003. Like, Tarzan is in New York City, just like hopping from building to building like Spider-Man.
They did try, I have to say, they did try some unique things like that back in that generation. It's the same way the Predator, which was a creature that could hunt in the jungle, in Predator 2, they moved him to Los Angeles and it was all about he's in the concrete jungle. So in theory, it makes sense to do something like that with Tarzan. And I have to say, I agree. For a pilot, it really, really worked out well because sometimes when they do this in the modern day, you can see the formula at hand. Here comes this moment, here comes that moment. And with the exception of the big final battle at the end of this pilot, I didn't necessarily know how one scene was going to roll into the next. I wasn't following the formula. It was played quite well. And it was quite slow moving at the start, which is not something you often see on modern day network TV, which is good. It gave you time. Of course, you had the intro that just like threw you into it and was kind of hilarious and how quickly it did that. But after we caught up with Jane and then we found out who everyone it was, it moved at its own pace. It never felt rushed. I don't know whether that's down to the fact that it had 46 minutes as opposed to current TV, which has 42 to 43 minutes these days. I don't know, but I believe I remember saying this about the Winchesters. The Winchesters gave elements of nostalgia of that era, but it still felt rushed in the way that a lot of modern TV shows do. Tarzan never felt rushed to me. It took its time with the story and it played it out really well. And I thought that was a very effective pilot as a result.
Yeah, how do you take your time but also accomplish so much? It's confusing, but good.
Very good. I think it's also because like it really did feel like each scene needed to be there. Like even though we were letting things breathe in a way that they would be important. Like either it was establishing character or it was establishing the plot or doing both at the same time. And I just feel like in this era of TV where there's just so much content, a lot of shows are not doing that. We're doing vibes, or we're on streaming, so they're like, we're gonna give you this vibe premiere, and by episode 4, we're going to finally give you some story that you can actually sink your teeth into, and you could not do that before streaming. And like this pilot, very much, it was like not a calling card, but like this was the resume, right? Like you could just tell this was the script that they had put together, and now they just filmed it. Like this is what the studio had said yes to, because it's just that darn good. Like I just feel like you were immediately invested. I'm invested in everything. I'm not just invested in Jane in Tarzan's plot. Like I'm invested in like whatever his uncle is doing with him. I want to know what's up with Michael. I want to see more of her partner Sam because he's cool. Like
I love him.
He just wants to solve crimes.
And I love that, like, I don't know if it's a trope or a cliche where like I feel like we see this a lot in like detective or like cop shows where like the boss is like, you can't do this case, it's above your pay grade, and then the detective and his partner is like, should we do it anyway? And they do it and they like almost die, but they solve the case, and then the captain's like, don't do it again, but good job. And like I loved that, like I love that trope. I was eating it up because I was like, yeah, Sam, you better show him that you know what you're doing. No one believes in you, but I do. So does Jane. I love that trope cliche. It's like when it's good, and they did it so well.
And you can already see their rapport too, because she's like, what's your deal? And he matter of factly says what his deal is, and she's like, okay, cool. Or they're seen in the car when she clearly knows she's not going back to her apartment, so she's like, what are we doing? He's like, let's go do some solving. And she's like, okay, we're going.
And I loved I think it was in like the first scene in the police station where the whole group is talking, and I think it was Mike that said something weird, and they share a look together, and like that said a lot more than any line of dialogue could say about their rapport. And speaking of the script, you were just talking about, Sabrina, and to Michael's earlier point about there not being a lot of dialogue, there are scenes without there's a lot of stunt work, there's a lot of like that scene on the roof, there wasn't any dialogue. It was just Jane like piecing things together as they haul Tarzan off into the helicopter. She clocks the patch on the guy's jacket. I think at that scene she grabs the necklace. Like, there's so much happening that isn't spoken, but it's not boring because they're not speaking. It's like, I want to see what the script looks like, because it's probably shorter than the average script, but not a millisecond was wasted. I don't know. I took note of that. I was like, no one's speaking, but I'm not bored.
It was such an early 2000 thing. I feel like you don't see that on TV. I don't know whether it's just that they have to use every minute now, or whether it's just that the dialogue has to work overtime, because we've seen that in a lot of CW pilots. People talk and talk and talk to get the exposition across.
And series finales.
Oh yes, very much so, very much so. But whereas this used his time sparingly, and I don't know whether it's the things like The Dark Knight, which when fight scenes started, suddenly you had the epic music, changed cinema or whatever. Hard to believe Batman Begins came out 2 years after that. This shows you how things quickly modernized. But like,
crazy,
isn't it? Like, that set the tone for Arrow and things. Like, when Arrow has a fight scene, would be playing in the background of every single scene. And don't get me wrong, I love music, but you see that opening fight scene in Tarzan, it looked so ambitious. The rain, it was just endless minutes of silence, and the only thing you could hear was just the rain falling. And then, like I said, those overly dramatic punchlines. That was a time for television. You just don't see things like that anymore.
No, same with Tarzan. I think he speaks for the first time 20 minutes into the episode. And his first line of dialogue is simply hi.
Yeah.
As he says hello. But it's used so well, because it really does. I mean, they were establishing the romance they're gonna do with Jane and Tarzan, like,
and I was eating it up.
Immediately. Saying that
palm of their hand
move he does to lay in front of her. Hello. After his uncle just said he doesn't speak.
It did take me out though, when I think it was after they captured him on the rooftop, and then she goes to Greystoke because she's like, I got your number. And he shows Tarzan's little tank. I don't know what to call it. They had our guy in khaki cargo pants. And
a nice sweater from the Gap.
I was dying. I was like, they turned him into an Abercrombie model. It was so 2003 though, and I'm like, oh, this sense of place is just so chef's kiss. I loved it.
It's really good. I mean, of course, set design is still impeccable these days in TV, but I think I really enjoyed Tarzan's room, because it encapsulated the image that his uncle wants everyone to see. It does not look like a room for a gentleman in his 20s. Very much a child's room. And he said, he looks like an adult, but his mind's still very much like a kid. And Tarzan's like, that's not true, actually. Don't have the mind of a child. And you can tell, like, yes, he looks at the world differently from everybody else. He grew up with gorillas, which we did get to see them, or apes. He grew up with apes, and we did get to see them. My mind, when you see that flashback, when they discovered Tarzan for the first time and the ape was on the ground, I said, Kerchak! Which is not, I was like, this is not Disney Tarzan. But I was like, that's his father. What did you do?
Traumatizing viewers.
I know. But they really established that there is a difference between how Tarzan sees himself and how his uncle sees him.
Yeah.
And I really want to know in the coming episodes, outside of the fact that his uncle's clearly experimenting on him, is there like a trauma aspect for his uncle in which he can only see him as Tarzan was maybe 6, 8 years old. I think he can only see him as the young nephew he lost, and not the man that he found in the jungle.
Yeah.
The scene at the end when the fire brigade told them that, and the police told them there's probably no chance that he's alive, and the uncle was like, he can't be dead. An interesting way to play that, because at the start it felt emotional, but then as it went on, it kind of felt like that villainous, oh, he can't be dead. So he's a very hard person to read. Obviously, he's been very much set up to be the villain of the piece, but I assume there is some kind of care there for his nephew. But he wants to control him, and like you said, he sees him differently than he is. So I feel like he's going to be an interesting character going forward. I don't know what his journey looks like.
I don't trust him because
Mm-mm.
the desperation to keep Tarzan contained, it's far too much for not
Mhm.
to be some like not to weave a conspiracy theory about like, are you trying to test his DNA so that you can put this in more people? Like, because obviously for a human to be scaling buildings that way, I feel like it's a little bit more than I was raised by an ape in the jungle. I don't
Mhm.
know. Maybe there's going to be some sort of supernatural element to it, because or sci-fi or something. Because I mean, this is the 2003 we're talking about. um, but yeah, I don't trust the uncle as much as he tries to come off as like the doting, caring uncle who
Mhm.
just doesn't want Tarzan to get hurt to Jane. I think she also is kind of like, what? I don't. Something's off here. Um, I think there's a whole conspiracy with Greystoke.
Oh, for sure.
And
And
then
her.
maybe even the police captain's in on it because he reacted strangely when she
Mm.
showed him the picture. Don't trust anybody but Jane and Tarzan. And her sister, Nikki, Leighton Meester, which truly giving in that with the blonde hair. And but the first scene in the when they're when we first meet Nikki and she's talking to Jane, that scene, I was like, were Leighton and Sarah Wayne Callie's not in the same room because the editing was giving we're not acting together. Did you guys clock that too?
I
I was just kind of
didn't
like,
know.
why is it so awkward?
I noticed it kept cutting back, but I never thought of it like that.
It just felt
Um,
like Leighton was not reacting to, and this is not a knock on Leighton, it's a knock on the
mhm.
editing because it just felt like two different scenes that they put
Okay.
together.
Mhm.
There were quite a lot of familiar faces in that for me. I don't know if you guys thought as well. Obviously, Sarah Wayne Callies, Leighton Meester, the police captain, Jughead's comic editor from Riverdale, the editor
Oh,
at Pap Comics. Um, and I think the bad guy I recognized from an episode of Swamp Thing or something like that. So yeah, it's always nice to see familiar faces in an old classic WB pilot, especially when they're associated with like WB or CW properties.
mhm. The actor who plays the uncle, I
Oh
don't know his
yes, of
name,
course.
but
Mitch Mitch Pelagi, I think.
okay. Well, he doesn't he isn't he often a villain? I
Oh
feel
yeah,
as
all
it.
the time.
Okay.
Um, I think he was also in Supernatural. He played the character Tom Welling played in the Winchesters, but obviously aged up. So he played that
Okay.
same character in Supernatural. Um, the three of us had a conversation on the day we discovered Tarzan and talked about a few more WB shows. I'm pretty sure he was in all of them. So yeah, he's a regular as far as the WB goes, and he always plays kind of like not always villainous, but antagonistic kind of roles.
Does it
Okay,
well.
cool. Yeah, he does. Because he's like, sir, I know you. I remember I had this when I saw his face, I had this vivid flashback of him with a cigarette saying something to somebody about something needing to be done and then just tossing it away like a villain, back when they used to be able to smoke on broadcast. So I was like, I know you. But to go back to the editing, but not necessarily editing the film music editor. Yes. The musical
The
cue.
Avril
Oh
Lavigne
my
serve at
goodness.
the end, I'm like uprooting Tarzan to I'm with you. What? I love it.
When it kicked in, I gasped. I was like,
Same.
Same.
yes, I can't. This is what we were talking about in a previous pod, where because there's just so much music in television these days, you don't really get to be able to have your mind concentrate on a song that's playing in a very pivotal scene. And in the pilot, they give you two. They give you the Avril Lavigne moment at the end, and then before that, there is I believe it's "Go" by Plum, and
Mhm.
it's the scene in which she's changes like I can't possibly be attracted to you. You don't know me. And he's just sniffing her hair.
They were both like low-key feral.
Yeah, they were. And I was like, the way the camera is working too, because it gets he's like up in the tree and he jumps down and it's kind of dark and you just have that one light coming from because they're in the park. And I was like, this is breathing. And the way that the song drops and then crescendos as he's getting picked up by the police, I had to rewind the scene like 5 times. Because the thing that truly got me was that when the singer goes, let go, she lets go of him at the same time the guitar strums and the word go is hit.
Oh.
And I was like, the editing. They was like, we definitely timed that for that. And I was like, why don't we do this anymore?
I know. I love that scene too. I forgot all about it until you brought it up. But it felt more than just like romance. It felt like it humanized him.
Mhm.
Because it seems like everyone's just like infantilizing him. And that showed, I think, to Jane, like, oh, this is actually a man. It's not some child, not somebody to really be feared. It really humanized him, I think.
Mhm.
And their chemistry sold it really well because it really played into that in the end when she was like, "You're alive," and then they had the like, did she hug him? I think she did hug him, and then he sniffed at her again, as Tarzan does. And it was all very romantic and angsty and dramatic, like television was in the early 2000s. I mean, like, I don't know why the show didn't last longer because if you were tuning into the WB, that's exactly the kind of drama you wanted to say, and this ticked all of the boxes.
It
I want to
really
look up
did.
like what it aired with because it would pair so well with like Smallville on at the time, Michael?
It would have been, yeah. It would have been this moody, broody third season, yeah.
Yeah, like the ending music cue, Avril Lavigne. Smallville did that so
Yeah.
much with like they would end on like a Clark and Lana moment, and there would be like this big song at the end. And I was like, the recipe was there. What went so bad? Do you know how like frustrated I am that there's only 7 more episodes and not
All
7
right.
total
I
seasons?
know. I
Like
just
I know these 7 episodes are still gonna serve and it's still gonna be like perfect cult classic and we're gonna love it. But I'm like, ugh, I can just imagine where the show after just one episode, I'm like, he would have like helped the police solve
Mhm.
crimes. Like, ugh, would have been so good. I just know it.
it is frustrating though, because it's like I know 11-year-old me would have been down bad for the show if she knew it was on. And then like if it was like canceled, yeah, like to have I wonder I know I would have been devastated. But like I wonder like how people felt, like what exactly was wrong. I mean, in this day and age, we did look at the numbers and the it did drop, but like these were the numbers that the CW would kill for now.
Yeah.
We were still in the millions. We weren't doing too shabby. So I wish, that they had been able to like see it have life. I do think it's the type of show though that um 1 season, 2 season tops. And like we weren't living in an era of television where that would have been acceptable. It is now, but back then it wouldn't have been. But it was like lightning in a bottle in that pilot. They really
Yeah.
had something special, and I just
Ah,
wish it lived on.
we were robbed of like Tarzan and Jane YouTube edits. Like we would have been
Mm,
watching those after school on YouTube when we were 14.
right? It just would have been amazing. I really do. I can't wait till we like launch into the rest of the episodes. I had to stop myself from watching episode 2.
Oh, I know. I would have gobbled them all up in one sitting.
I know. It's just good. I'm excited for the rest of the music cues too. I want to know, like, is
Mhm.
this going to be one of those shows where like every episode just has an iconic moment done to a song?
I hope so.
Fingers crossed. I don't know. It makes me want to make a playlist.
Yeah, we should.
Should.
No one knows the show existed. I mean, we didn't, but damn it, we're gonna bring it back to life.
We're putting the spotlight on it.
Yes. Oh, okay. Okay, so I did want to say though, I it was giving me Gotham. I was watching it and I was like, it very much feels like Batman. Like it just
Yeah.
feels very like it would have if they had done a crossover with a DC show, I would not have been
Birds of
surprised.
Prey.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Same year too, was it? Well, the year afterwards,
Yeah,
but still, yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
it could have worked.
it really worked. And no, I agree totally, Sabrina. The atmosphere was so Gotham. One of my biggest gripes with Batwoman, especially in its first season, was that Gotham never felt like Gotham, and that's partially because a lot of the ins stuff was filmed in Vancouver, and the exterior shots were filmed in Chicago to give it more of that glossy Dark Knight look. But this here felt so Gotham-like, and it really makes me wish that we had like a Batman show in the early 2000s. It would have been angsty, it would have been broody, and there would have been random needle drops that made no sense. But like it would have lived in infamy forever. And I just wish we could have gotten that because you're right, the city was alive. It really truly felt like a classic Batman kind of show.
And the fashion would have been great too. Because I was liking the little moments I was seeing with the clothing. Jane's outfit for dinner was nice. She had that like sequinty top that was like deep, deep black. And we were in a lot. Michael was in this like leather trench. And I was like, this is definitely early 2000s. They were like, we have a small budget for the clothing, but when we're going to hit you with the fashion, we will.
They had Leighton in just the 2003 Teen Girl Special.
Mhm.
Like it was Haley James Scott all the way.
It was, and this was also the era of television where like if you have, I think it didn't even matter if it was a male lead or a female lead. We need a plucky sibling
Oh yeah,
right
definitely.
off the top.
It was so, I feel like I've never seen Leighton play this kind of role. And it's so funny to imagine just 4 years later she would be Blair Waldorf.
And herself.
Everyone was just on the precipice of their biggest role yet, but it wasn't to be with Tarzan. But no, I agree with you totally. I remember was it Lois and Clark? Lois had a plucky sibling, so I mean, like that was a kind of a trope. Buffy, obviously, later in the run, that was a trope of television back then. Roles like that aren't needed as much on TV anymore. But my goodness, did they work back then?
Yeah,
They did.
so good.
So good. I feel like though, like we should end the review or I guess the gushing session here. Because I mean we could be talking forever about this pilot episode of Tarzan. I would say one of the best pilots I've ever seen. And it was a hidden gem.
Really good. Truly hidden, like best kept secret.
And it felt like a mini movie without feeling rushed or constricted or anything. It just felt like a 46-minute movie. I'm intrigued to see if they can keep the momentum going now that kind of like story can of worms has been opened, if they can keep it going. But wow, they came out of the gate strong.
For sure. So you guys, if you haven't watched Tarzan yet, you should do a swift Google. And then you should watch along with us because we will be watching episode 2 and talking about it on the pod. But thank you for listening to our first episode for season 3 of the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Reed.
Bye, y'all.